Passover is food for a journey. That's true of all covenant meals. When people today say, I'll drink to that, and they clink their glasses together, they're saying in effect, I believe in that goal, in that promise, and in you, let's go for it together. Not every covenant is a good covenant. Think of Genesis 3. What's the destination proposed by the serpent? You will be like God, knowing good and evil. And Adam and Eve say, we'll eat to that. And the food for that journey is good for food, pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom, but it's also forbidden fruit. So they eat the wrong meal for the wrong journey to the wrong destination, and find, of course, that the reality of the destination looks nothing like the brochure. They are under God's curse and banished from the Garden of Eden. The temptation still reaches us to make something of ourselves by taking on forbidden fruit, and it needs resisting. Wrong kind of meal, wrong kind of destination. Passover is the opposite of forbidden fruit. It's what they're commanded to eat. And the promise to which the meal is being eaten is the one that God makes to them in Exodus 6, verses 6 to 8. I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. Now that is still unfulfilled in Exodus 12, when God tells the Israelites about this meal. Get this, they've been in Egypt for 430 years, most of that time as slaves, increasingly oppressed by the Egyptians. Pharaoh has repeatedly refused to let them go, and God tells them to eat this meal, and tells them it is very literally food for a journey. They are to eat it as such, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. But all the time they are preparing it, and even while they are eating it, they can see no way in which the journey can ever take place. First, you prepare and eat the meal, and then you are ready for the road when Pharaoh says, up, go. We would like it to be the other way round. We feel, don't we, that the time for fellowship with God is when all the enemies have been dealt with, when we feel that our lives are not under threat, when the journey is over, not before it begins. And God doesn't work that way. Think of Psalm 23. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. That is surely a reference back to the Passover, but it also reflects something of God's MO, his way of working with his people. First, sit down to fellowship with me. Get fuel on board for the journey, right out from under the noses of your oppressors. Let me deal with them. You sit down first and deal with me. In Luke 22, Jesus eats a Passover meal with his disciples, and we call it the Last Supper. But it is also fuel for a journey, food that is eaten around a promise. The promise is not just that Jesus will eat this Passover again in the kingdom of God, but that they will be ruling with him, judging the 12 tribes of Israel, verse 30. That's the destination. And again, it's a journey that seems humanly impossible to begin. And again, they are eating not just surrounded by enemies, but with a betrayer in their midst. And Jesus also talks to them about how they are to make that journey. They are not to spend it lording over people, but serving them. They were arguing at that table about which of them was considered to be the greatest, a recipe for disaster. God's people have to eat the right meal for the right journey in the right way if they're going to arrive at their destination with him. And that is what Paul is driving at in 1 Corinthians 11, 17 to 34. He wasn't angry with the Corinthians because they used the wrong words or made the wrong gestures at the wrong time. He didn't say anything about whether or not the meal should be eaten in silence or with music playing. He tackled the relationships between the rich church members and the poor. It seems that the rich were eating their communion meal together before the poor members of the church could even get there. And Paul reminded them that this meal is how the church proclaims the Lord's death until he comes. The implication being that such a divisive way of eating this meal is a truly dreadful way to make that proclamation. Kind of, he died to reconcile us to God, but no way we'll be reconciled to each other. Wrong kind of meal, wrong kind of destination. See verses 27 to 32. getting communion right is far more than arguments about the liturgy or who should stand where and do what. It's about relationships with God and with each other. Nothing less than love will do. Otherwise, it is the wrong meal for the wrong journey in the wrong direction.